Well, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, Happy Week in between the two where I really don't know what day it is, except for Sunday. That's obviously the most important one. But we're, just so glad that each of you are here, that you chose to spend your Sunday with us. And something about me is that I've been chronically online since about 2007. And every once in a while, I think about different people in viral videos and just wonder, like, where are they? Where are they now? What are they doing with their lives? And so in hopes that, maybe one day they'll stumble across this video on YouTube, here are the top 5 viral people that I think about on a weekly basis. And we're really going to go back to the Vine archives here. So everyone born in about 1998, this is a special treat for you. So coming in at number 5 is the croissant Vine. Let's see if we can get that up on the, so you already know what this is. We can get that up on the screen here.
Yeah! Yep. Stop! I could have dropped my croissant.
It's a classic. Coming in at number 4, the knife kid. You already know.
No!
Coming in at number 3, we have Trey.
My name is Trey. I have a basketball game tomorrow. Well, I'm a point guard. I got 2 games.
At number 2, this one I don't think was actually a Vine. This was pure YouTube. This one might be a little less recognizable to some of you, but it is the Blueberries girl. If you know this one.
Blueberry. You forgot blueberries. I said blueberries. Blueberries. Blueberries.
And let me just say, I didn't edit that. That was the video that was on YouTube with a little, bookend, transition in the slow-mo. That was not me. But coming in at number 1 is the LeBron James kid. Yeah.
LeBron
You know.
James, LeBron James, LeBron James, LeBron James, LeBron James.
Which is good. Which is good stuff. That was just a representative of a really nice time in the world. But anyways, I really just wonder sometimes in my little head, how are these people doing? Did they get over the momentary fame, or is that their entire personality? Is the LeBron James kid still just saying that for fun all the time? I don't know, do they get stopped in the streets, and are people just constantly doing impressions of them? I can't imagine what it would be like to have the world's perception of who you are based on a 15-second or less video. Again, I'm sorry to the LeBron James kid, but he will always be the LeBron James kid to me. I will never look up his name. Blueberries girl, that's the extent of the rent that they take up in my brain. I'm not going to bother to learn their names, and that's just me being real. But the desire to be known and recognized by others is a really common part of the human experience, and we usually identify people by using outward factors, things like ethnicity or gender, and also things like jobs, family status, and accomplishment. But sometimes we can have our not so finest moments as our key identifiers. For example, to the soccer team that I played on in middle school, I'm the woman that scored on our own net. And I had a really good cry immediately after that. And you weren't on that team though. I don't know why you're shaking your head, but it was not my shining brightest moment. To the people at CrossFit a month ago, I was the girl that ran straight to the bathroom after the workout. Just beelined it, had to go. I was seeing stars. Not great. To the Dairy Queen door, I'm the girl that always pulls instead of pushes. And that's that. But on a more serious note, our identities are a crucial part to each of us. And that's because our identity shapes the way we see and feel about ourselves. And it brings about a sense of belonging and purpose. It helps us express who we believe ourselves to be both inwardly and outwardly. So imagine our identities being shaped by the epic fail compilations of our own lives. That would not be great. Yet, this is such a common phenomenon where many of us can find ourselves holding the weight of those not so great things about us and making that the core of who we are. We can carry around shame over past mistakes, insecurities, and lies that people have placed on us or we have placed on ourselves. And we allow those things to dictate our identity. And this is a problem because it ultimately means those things, those negative things aren't just shaping us on the inside, but they also can influence our actions and behaviors. So maybe the abuse or mistreatment you've suffered because of someone else's actions has led you to be closed off in relationships and being vulnerable with people. Maybe a crippling addiction has led you to isolate yourself from those around you. The pattern we can see here is that the proximity of these hurts and wounds to our identity, it affects how we live our lives. And maybe you're thinking, am I just supposed to get over everything that I've been through? I can't just forget about the ways that I've been hurt or that I've hurt other people or the ways that I've messed up. And, there's no on or off switch for pain. And believe me, if there was, I'd be the first one to use it. And that's not what I'm saying. The reality is that sin entering the world, it means that we will likely feel the weight of our mistakes, our hurts, our past throughout our lives here on earth. But the good news is that they actually don't have to shape our identity. In fact, God can actually use all of those things, the good and the bad, things that we've done, things that we've gone through to strengthen us and to give us hope. And so tonight we're wrapping up our Scandal series, and you'll want to listen closely. The tea is piping hot. And really our goal with this series is to break down these stories that now, and even at the time that they took place, they were controversies in their own right. Seeing how God transformed each person and note some of the principles that we can glean and apply to our own lives here today in 2024. Back to this idea of our identities back to this idea of identities and all the things that contribute to them. We're going to be talking about someone from the Bible tonight who had had every reason to carry around the shame of her past. And her debut in the Old Testament, she is introduced as a prostitute named Rahab. And this title, it seems to follow her later on when she's referenced in certain parts of the New Testament. And I wonder, if at any point, whether or not people would have called her this to her face, and if she was like, hey, you can just call me Rahab. You don't need to worry about the other part. But I seriously couldn't imagine having the deepest sin of my past being the way that people remember me for thousands of years. That's definitely not how I would want to be known, because there's so much more to me than the things that I'm not proud of. So Rahab's story is found in the Old Testament book of Joshua. In chapter 2, a man named Joshua is leading the Israelite people to the land that God has promised them now that his predecessor, Moses, has died. And here's what it says in the first 7 verses. Then Joshua secretly sent out 2 spies from the Israelite camp at Acacia Grove. He instructed them, scout out the land on the other side of the Jordan River, especially around Jericho. So the 2 men set out and came to the house of a prostitute named Rahab and stayed there that night. But someone told the king of Jericho, some Israelites have come here tonight to spy out the land. So the king of Jericho sent orders to Rahab, bring out the men who have come into your house, for they have come here to spy out the whole land. Rahab had hidden the 2 men, but she replied, yes, the men were here earlier, but I didn't know where they were from. They left the town at dusk as the gates were about to close. I don't know where they went. If you hurry, you can probably catch up with them. And actually, she had taken them up to the roof and hidden them beneath the bundles of flax she had laid out. So the king's men went looking for the spies along the road to the shallow crossings of the Jordan River. And as soon as the king's men left, the gate of Jericho was shut. So now why does it matter that Rahab protected these spies? Well, on a practical level, her actions helped the spies gather information about the city of Jericho before an attempt to take over the land. It has also affirmed God's promise that the Israelite people would gain victory over the Canaanite nations, because this woman, who would have been considered an outcast and definitely not someone who would have a significant role in the trajectory of history, but because she was willing to risk everything and hide the spies. And so Israel would be reminded that God was with them and that they could trust him to follow through. And not only did she impact history for Israel, but also herself and her own family. Here's what it says later on in Joshua 2:12 and 13. This is Rahab. She says, "Now swear to me by the Lord, you will be kind to me and my family since I have helped you. Give me some guarantee that when Jericho is conquered, you will let me live, along with my father and mother, my brothers and sisters, and their families." Then the spies respond by saying, "We offer our own lives as a guarantee for your safety." The men agreed. "If you don't betray us, we will keep our promise and be kind to you when the Lord gives us the land." And that is exactly what happened. When the Israelites eventually attack Jericho, Rahab and her family are spared and are brought to the city, out of the city unharmed, while the rest of it was destroyed. And throughout the Bible, we can see the redemption of Rahab take place. In Hebrews 11:31, it says here that she is listed as a hero of the faith. It says, "It was by faith that Rahab the prostitute was not destroyed with the people in her city who refused to obey God, for she had given a friendly welcome to the spies." In James 2:25, her courage is highlighted. It says, "Rahab the prostitute is another example. She was shown to be right with God by her actions when she hid those messengers and sent them safely away by a different road." And lastly, one of the coolest ways that we see her redemption story played out is in Matthew 1. And it has the ancestry of Jesus. And so she's actually listed in Jesus' ancestry as Rahab, not as Rahab the prostitute, as Rahab. So we all have things in our lives that we aren't proud of. But those things don't have to define us because our identity comes from God. And so here we have this woman whose sin followed her as a label throughout the Bible. She was a sex worker engaged in sexual activity outside of God's intended design. And that doesn't really seem like it should be on the resume of a revered Bible character. And I think maybe sometimes we hold this untrue perception of people in the Bible or Christians in general that, they're all squeaky clean and completely perfect. And that's like why God must love them, because they're just such good people. And I just want to let you know that if you believe that today, it's actually far from the truth. Reuben isn't perfect. Brett's not perfect. Every person on this stage, every person serving in the back and in the lobby isn't perfect. I myself am very far from perfect. I sometimes cut corners. I can be jealous and greedy and complacent and rude and selfish, and that's just skimming the surface. And I'm not sharing that with you today to communicate that it's okay to do those things, because it's not. And it's through God's strength in my life that I continue to work through those things. And if you're a Christian here today, you should be doing that as well. But I want you to understand that our deficiencies, they don't disqualify us from God's love or his purpose for our lives. In the New Testament of the Bible, one of the early founders of the church named Paul, he wrote a letter to a church in a city named Corinth. And he really eloquently phrases this idea. So after he's talking about all of these crazy, intense events that he endured for the sake of spreading God's word. He was in constant danger. He went without food, water, shelter, just to name a few, which is like pretty wild. For me, there are so many things that could ruin my day. I'll have one of those prayers. I'm like, God, why do you keep giving your toughest battles to your weakest soldiers? And he's like, you just have to go back to your car and grab your charger. Or girlie, you just got to cancel your dentist appointment. Why are you crying? Anyways, so Paul's hardships made him incredibly heroic, and he would have had every right to flex, but this is what he says. That experience, those things that he endured, they were not worth boasting about. That experience is worth boasting about, but I'm not going to do it. I will boast only about my weaknesses. If I wanted to boast, I would be no fool in doing so, because I would be telling the truth. But I won't do it because I don't want anyone to give me credit beyond what they can see in my life or hear in my message, even though I've received such wonderful revelations from God. So to keep me from becoming proud, I was given a thorn in my flesh, a messenger from Satan to torment me and keep me from being proud. And we don't exactly know what this thorn in Paul's flesh was, other than that it was a metaphor. It could have been some type of physical or spiritual or emotional affliction, but regardless, it was something that caused him a lot of harm, and it was intended to cause challenges for him as he continued and navigated his ministry. So he continues by saying, 3 different times I begged the Lord to take it away. Each time he said, my grace is all you need. My power works best in weakness. So now I am glad to boast about my weakness so that the power of Christ can work through me. That's why I take pleasure in my weaknesses and in insults, hardships, persecution, and troubles that I suffer for Christ. For when I am weak, then I am strong. So God's grace was all that Rahab needed. And in the ways that she fell short, God's power was actually shown. And if we consider the context of the spies who were trying to scout out the land that their people would one day take over, hiding in the house of a prostitute, kind of a smart move. Like, think about it. There wouldn't have been too much suspicion as so many people would have been coming in and out. And we learn later on in Joshua 2:15 that Rahab's house was situated on a city wall. So men would have had an easy escape route if they needed, like maybe their own little Rapunzel moment. Rahab's life circumstances were actually essential to the advancement of this story. So where we may see a woman with a troubling past, if we take a deeper look, we can actually see a courageous and heroic woman whose mistakes and sins are fully redeemed by God. And so maybe you find yourself thinking that because of where you are in life, because of the things you're dealing with, because of things that you're going through, you'll never be good enough. You'll never be a good enough Christian. You'll never be worthy enough of God's love and blessing. And I hope you know that that is truly such a lie. The amazing thing about God is that he meets us, each of us, where we're at. He meets us right in the thick of our mess and invites us to step out of that and into the life that he has for us. You know, he doesn't hate you because of the sin that you're wrestling with, even if it's been an ongoing battle, or because of the mistakes you have made. He will never love you any more or any less than he does in this moment right now. You know, nothing will ever change that. And when we make that choice to leave behind the shame of our past in exchange for God's freedom, we no longer act out of our insecurities. You know, shame, unfortunately, is this very, very powerful thing. Shame shackles you. It whispers lies to the deepest parts of you. It causes you to hide and isolate rather than dealing with what's actually going on inside of you. And while guilt says you made a mistake, shame says that you are a mistake. And that causes us to lose sight of the identity that we have in Christ. So what I admire so deeply about Rahab is that her actions were not informed by shame, but rather her courageous choice to hide the spies. That was actually a result of her faith. And if anything, that's the most important part about her, not her shortcomings. And obviously there would have been a huge risk in her taking in these spies and aligning herself with her people's enemies. But what's so beautiful is that her growing faith and understanding of God is what guides her. Further in Joshua 2, she talks to the spies about how she knew about their God and the miraculous wonders and signs he had performed that the Israelite people were able to witness. She talks about how God parted the Red Sea so that they could walk through it and escape from the Egyptians who had them in centuries of slavery. She had an inclination about this powerful God, and she knew that if she took the risk that she would be protected, that they would protect her, and God did. More specifically, God spares her and her entire family from the destruction of their city in Jericho. He saves them and redeems them. And God labels her not with the title as prostitute, but he labels her with his grace, as a child and as a daughter. And as we reflect on this idea that we aren't defined by our past because our identity is given to us by God, you know, this God that created us and loves us and has a plan for each of our lives. You know, I invite you to think about what are the things that you've allowed to form and shape your identity. What labels have you given yourself or other people have given you? What past mistakes or hurts? What personal insecurities have been leading you to carry around shame? I've never been much of a science or math person. They just never really came super easy to me in school. I know that the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. Calculators exist. ChatGPT exists. And that's why I became a pastor. Don't need those skills. But in high school, my biology teacher was handing back a quiz and made this snide remark about how it actually had finally looked like I had applied myself and had gotten a half-decent grade in the class. And it wasn't really what he said, but more so how he said it. But and I just felt that like internal embarrassment. But what I hadn't realized is that the comment was actually loud enough for everyone in close proximity to hear. And I remember just like getting gradually hotter and hotter and feeling my face turn progressively red as I slowly looked around and saw my classmates' expressions of shock from what he said and the way that he had said it. And I just felt so embarrassed in that moment. And I felt like I was stupid and that my classmates now thought the same thing. And so this experience contributed to a very deep-seated lie that I still struggle with today, that I'm not smart. And when I share that with people, they're usually surprised. I don't know if it's the glasses, but throughout college and a brief stint in grad school, that's a story for another day. If there was a big assignment I needed to do, I would get just so much anxiety about it, even though I could do it, but just to the point where it was so paralyzing. And it wasn't because I was lazy or just trying to intentionally procrastinate, but it was just deep down, I just didn't really think I was capable of doing it. I didn't feel smart, which is silly because I did well in college and grad school. But it's just interesting to see how a lie that was based on no evidence other than a teacher being a jerk has had such a hold on who I am for years. Another area that has caused me to struggle with my identity is relationships. And to start off, I didn't really get to observe many healthy relationships growing up. And so when the time came for me to be in my own, I didn't really know what I was doing. And so a mixture of hurt that I inflicted on guys and hurt that was inflicted on me just led me to believe that I wasn't capable of or worthy of being in a stable and loving partnership. And because of that, I made so many poor choices in dating, and I had just had this overall lack of trust in guys that I just couldn't be lovable. And I don't share these things to trauma dump on you. I did that with my therapist enough. But I want to show you the power in just explicitly calling out those things. As you name them, they really do start to lose their power and control over you. And that opens the door into stepping into God's freedom. And that's something that I've gotten to experience in my own life. As I've just really wrestled with those things, I've grown in my confidence when it comes to big projects or big work tasks. And even sometimes when it feels like a struggle, those moments challenge me and invite me to trust God over my own abilities. I had to wrestle with all of these negative connotations about relationships for such a long time. And I really had to look at myself a couple years back and ask myself, why was I literally settling for crumbs when it would bring all of these unhelpful habits into relationships? And God really had to work on me. And I'm going to go on a brief tangent because I know there's a lot of you here today wondering if you'll ever find the right person. And I just want to encourage you that number one, God cares more about your love life, way more than you actually do. And two, he's always working, even when you can't see it. And so my boyfriend Matthias, who apparently his last name is Weeb now, that's news to me, but he's Mennonite, so honestly, it's all the same. Anyways, we've been dating for 8 months, which is about 5 years in Christian years. And his parents are here too, this is great. But anyways, maybe you've met him, he was playing bass, and maybe you haven't, and I almost don't want you to meet him because he's a fan favorite, and I think everyone likes him more than they like me, but that's actually a very good problem to have. But anyways, pretty much there's so many green flags about him. He's the best, but one of the biggest was that he always had his cards on the table, and I never really had to guess where he stood with me. And at first I was very thrown off, because it was so foreign to me. I was this guy is being very nice and polite and forward. Ugh. What? Some of you get it. They're out there. I promise. They are. You just gotta wait, I guess. But anyways, God used that in him to really show me his love and grace, and that I'm a person who is worthy of love and stability. And that was after I had convinced myself that there were no good guys out there, and that I would just work at the project long enough, and then I would just go off and be a nun, and no one would ever hear from me again. Still could be in the cards. I don't. Just kidding. Anyways, but I just say that to be encouraged that, God will also work in and through your life in his perfect timing. So just hope that's a little encouragement to you, those of you who may be in that season. Anyways, but on an even greater scale, the best hope we receive is God's love for us. More specifically, when sin entered the world, there's a separation between God and humanity, and people used to have to rely on the laws recorded in the Old Testament. That's the first half of the Bible, part where before Jesus was born. They would rely on the Old Testament as their moral compass. But that didn't grant freedom. It was through the death of Jesus, who was a perfect and blameless man, that served as a way to pay the debt for all of humanity's sins. And because he died and came back to life, we believe that he defeated death and simultaneously tore down the wall that separated God from humanity. That freedom is knowing that one day we will be reunited with God in perfect harmony, and we will get to experience the complete fullness of his love. And so I encourage you, as we dive back into a time of worshiping together through songs, just think about those lies that may be shaping your identity, whether you've placed them there yourself or other people have. That you're ugly or not smart, or that no one really likes you, that you'll never amount to anything, or you'll never overcome your addictions or habits or problems. Whatever that thing is, just be honest with yourself. Be honest with God, because he already knows, and call it out for what it is. It's garbage, so call it out. And then imagine, if you want, imagine yourself laying those lies at the feet of Jesus. I'm laying down the lie that I'm not good enough, that I'm worthless, or that I'm a disgrace, that I'm beyond repair. Lay those things before him, and as you do that, accept the true identity that he has placed over you, that you are his son, his daughter, that you are his delight, his friend. He is so proud of you. He loves you. He doesn't condemn you. He actually runs to you with open arms. He wants to meet you where you're at, and he wants to play an active role in your life. He actually loves you so much that he died for you. He is on your side. He has good plans for you. He will never leave you or forsake you. I want to encourage you to just rest in those truths tonight. Why don't you stand, and I'll pray for us. And maybe you're here today, and whether, it's something that you felt God spoke to you during the message, or maybe just something else that you're wrestling with in life, and you just need someone to pray over you. We're going to have our prayer team available at the front, and I believe on the sides as well. They're here to just walk through life and encourage you. And so if there's something going on, I just encourage you to take that leap of faith. It might feel a little awkward. I promise no one is paying attention. They would just love to pray over you in whatever situation that you're facing. Jesus, we just thank you. You're so good. I thank you that because of your sacrifice, we have this new identity. Thank you for your sacrifice, Lord. And you see each person in this room. You know what each of us are carrying, Lord. You see the struggles, the hurts, the pain, the insecurities, the lies, whatever it is. And so, Lord, I just ask that you would meet us, each of us, where we're at today. Even if we're not at the place we think we should be, would we just be honest in your presence with where we're at, Lord? And would you just do a transformative work that only you can do? We thank you for people like Rahab, people who may have been seen as an outcast, as not good enough, Lord, and how you use people like that over and over again. I thank you that it is your grace that qualifies us, that we are not discounted because of our sins, because of our past, because of the things that we struggle with, Lord. I thank you that your grace is sufficient for us, and where we may feel weak, there's people in the room who probably feel weak tonight. That's actually where your strength is demonstrated, Father. So as we sing, Lord, would you just continue to be in the center of our hearts, the center of our lives, Lord, and just speak to us in a way that only you can do. Amen.